Last month in Brazil, 140,000 people met in 3 stadiums, pledging to make the Great Commission their main ambition. 3 million more watched online, promising to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ to every nation.
And we declare today,
Nós declaramos hoje,
now is the time for harvest.
agora é a hora da colheita.
Now is the season for revival.
Essa é a temporada do avivamento.
And every nation on earth will be touched.
Half a world away, Chinese Christians under intense persecution hold 24-hour-a-day secret prayer meetings, crying out for the nations.
主啊，中国的信徒不断的聚集。主啊，我们要做什么呢？我们要做什么呢？我们要建大房子吗？我们要聚集更多的人吗？主啊！
A similar scene plays out 7,000 miles away in North Africa.
God has put in our heart to be able to send 1,000 missionaries by the year 2025. And I really believe maybe one day America will end up with some Muslims, converts, missionaries coming to reach out to the Muslims there.
It's a far cry from those early days when Western missionary legends like William Carey, Hudson Taylor, and David Livingstone labored decades before seeing the fruits of their labor. Today, missionaries answer that same call. This new generation, however, comes from, among other places, the remote parts of Mongolia, desert sands of the Middle East and Southeast Asia.
And so before, where you would think of a missionary in the 1900s as pale, white, British folks dressed in somewhat Victorian clothes, that is over now. We have missionaries now that look like everyone.
Their efforts and those of countless others helping fuel the explosive growth of Christianity.
It is true that there is a shift taking place at the moment, and there are less missionaries coming from the United States and Europe, but it doesn't mean for a moment that there are less missionaries.
While the U.S. sends out the highest number of missionaries, more than half of those serving worldwide now come from Asia, Africa, and South America, regions that were once mission fields becoming the mission force.
So from countries that used to be kind of the focus point of mission, they have become the major players in mission.
In this part of Ukraine,
Among them, the likes of Ukrainian Sergei Rakuba, who is training hundreds of young people to be the next Christian generation spreading the gospel.
The future of the countries of the former Soviet Union is not in the hands of political leaders in the Kremlin or in the presidential palaces of Ukraine, Moldova, or Belarus, but it is in the hands of young Christians who, with a renewed heart, renewed vision and desire, are taking the gospel into contemporary society and influence it for eternity.
For several years, Rakuba's group, Mission Eurasia, has been sending dozens of Russian missionary teams to Mongolia, holding camps for thousands of children, many of whom have never heard the name of Christ.
We are in a remote western part of Mongolia, and it is still one of the most unreached places in the world. Sometimes we think that people around the world know about Jesus, but there are places like this that haven't been touched by the gospel.
To better appreciate the significance of these camps, you have to understand the history of Christianity here in Mongolia. Shortly after the fall of communism, there were only 10 believers in the entire country. Today, some 26 years later, some 60,000 believers are spread across this vast nation.
17-year-old Elena said she got the call to missions at a young age. This is her 3rd visit to Mongolia.
When I was 9 years old, I read a book about a missionary in a foreign country, and since then, I have had this burning desire to share God's love with people.
One place burning with missionary zeal is Africa. The prestigious Pew Research Center found that people who live south of the Sahara Desert and stretching all the way to the tip of Africa are seeking God unlike any other part of the world. Pew predicts that by 2060, Africa will be the most Christian continent. Congregations like Grace Bible Church in Johannesburg, South Africa, taking advantage of the phenomenal growth, sending missionaries across the continent.
We come from a history where things were done for us. People came to us to tell us about Christ. We were the so-called dark continent, and all of that. But we realize history changes.
Scores of missionaries now bringing the gospel back to re-evangelize a secular and often irreligious West.
You're just getting a much more diverse missionary movement now, where people are basically going from everywhere to everywhere. And you're even getting missionaries from Africa and Latin America who are going to Europe, who are going to North America.
So the courage of the African and the Asians of coming into the West should, number one, put us to shame, and then should motivate us that we, the ones who have taken the gospel to the East, now should be not all welcoming, but embracing them.
Dr. Becker says the modern missions movement is thriving as countless from around the world take up the mantle of obeying Jesus' command to make disciples of all nations.
And in some ways, we are back really at that early vision that we find in the book of Acts, where the Holy Spirit is poured forth on men and women from every tribe, every tongue, every nation, and they are sent forth to the ends of the earth to proclaim the gospel of Christ.
George Thomas, CBN News.